Should I introduce them?
Yep.
We've got Ernie Brooks on bass and also singing. Bill Rule, today he's playing the dulcimer, but he's usually our drummer, but he's also a great tabla player. And then percussion, Mustafa. Peter on trombone and sometimes on electronic percussion, sometimes singing. And Joyce guitar, clarinet, keyboards, and singing. And me, Stephen, guitar, singing, and getting into bass a little bit now too. And the other two members we have are Elodie on keyboards and John, another guitarist. So it makes eight. Eight is the full band. And then we have other members who join us, like Nomi from Hercules and Love Affair joined us for a while. Jerry Harrison plays keyboards with us sometimes. Larry Saltzman, the great guitar player, who played on some of Arthur's early band stuff, he joins us sometimes. So one of the ideas of the band is that we accept like interns, younger people who like to play with us, or other people who play with Arthur, but we try and keep it pretty much to that close circle of people.
So on the record, even though Elodie is not here, she is prominent, as well as Larry Saltzman on the record and John Sherman, the other guitar players.
Elodie Loughton, by the way. You notice how some folks have only first names and other folks have first and last names?
With a name like Elodie, it's just a beautiful musical name. You kind of only need that, but Elodie Loughton.
We all have DJ names too, but we're saving that.
My favorite song is probably Your Motion Says, and Arthur and I used to do that as the Sailboats. And the Sailboats was basically a country band. It was me and Arthur playing acoustic guitars and singing quasi-country harmonies. And but the thing about the songs is we some of the songs we do in different versions. Like Your Motion Says, we've done it as a kind of a folk song, but we also do it as a driving dance song as well. So the thing about Arthur's songs is the structures are so solid that they adapt to different styles. And Arthur himself loved to do his own songs in different styles. Like he would take one song and do it in 5 different ways, just as a way of exploring the song itself.
Well, one of the things we tried to do on the CD was to think really about the audience that would be listening to this. I mean, obviously when we play the music live, it lives, it breathes, but once you put it down and it's in that CD, it's there. So I think that one of the very good aspects about the project was that it allowed us to focus a lot on, if we had to take a snapshot at this particular point, what do we want to say? What do we think Arthur would have wanted us to say? And I think we've captured that with this CD.
At the same time, we recognize his involvement with process, and we have to let the process unfold, and we're surprised by the result, even if we have an intention, I think. Arthur wrote a lot of music, a lot of notes on pages, and sometimes going into the studio there would be page after page of dense material, and he would put on the disco track and say, okay, and I say, where do I start? He'd say anywhere. And that could mean anywhere on the page, and maybe anywhere in relation to the metrical structure, because I did what he said. So similar to all of those lines that appeared in a lot of these dance songs, dance tracks, was a more focused set of compositions which we refer to as the Singing Tractors, although the Singing Tractors was also an ensemble and a period in time and some other kind of concept. And this particular material is extremely elegant, a 2-bar, often of unequal length, unequal number of beats in the bars, syncopated melodies with a dyadic harmony, 2-note harmony that changed in each bar.
We could do one real fast.
We could.
For an illustration.
And it was a very interesting music that is precise on the page, and between the complex melody, which required a musician who could read notes, and the simple 2-note harmony, which anybody could play, he brought different kinds of people together to make this music. You asked me which one I want to do, and I said something else. Well,
that's process.
That's process, exactly.
Well, perfect demonstration of what went on in the studio the past few months.
We
Well,
asked
I
you
want
to
to
do
do what, I want to do what you're doing.
And are you as good?
Bill, it's all right.
Arthur liked to record on the full moon, and we tried to do that as well
And edit on the new moon.
because of the auspicious nature of that. And he was born in the year of the tiger. This is the year of the tiger, which started on Valentine's Day. So this is our chance to give him a Valentine, this record of his work. So happy Valentine's Day, Arthur. Happy Valentine's year.
I was introduced to Arthur by the famous gay poet Allen Ginsberg, and I had met Allen when I was in high school, and we were boyfriends for a while before Allen introduced me to Arthur. And then Allen introduced me to Arthur in this building on 12th Street in the East Village, 437 East 12th Street, where Arthur lived and Allen also lived, and a bunch of poets. So it was called the Poets Building, so that's where we met.
I met him through another composition major named Don Salmon, who actually played some of Arthur's pieces, very early pieces. And Don had become the superintendent of a little building down in the East Village. And I needed a place to stay, but it had no water, no electricity, no heat or anything. And I just stayed there for a couple of weeks and decided that I couldn't really live there. And Arthur came to look at the space, and that's how I actually met him. We had one of our first conversation had to do with Indian music, because I had just begun studying tabla. This was in the summer of 1974, and Arthur, in his eyes lit up, said, "Oh, well, I studied Indian music at College of Music." I said, "Oh, of course, I've heard of that." And he said, "So you study tabla? Do you practice?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Every day?" I said, "Well, yeah, dude." And then we had a conversation. He asked me if I knew about Velvet Underground and what I thought about Velvet Underground. So That's how the conversation went. And then I was reintroduced to Arthur later on, a couple years later, through Peter, down at the studio in Westbeth, where Peter would rehearse, and Arthur would also rehearse with his group, the Flying Hearts, which Ernie was a member of. And then Arthur started playing with Peter, and we all got together that way.
And I met at the Downtown Sound Recording Studio. It's a pretty popular recording studio down in Greenwich Village. At the time, I was working with James Mason on his Wolf Ticket project, and we probably, I know that one of the songs that I worked on with James Mason and Lisa Fisher was I Want Your Love, and the arrangement, the percussion arrangement, the juxtaposition of the congas and the bongos was something that Arthur was very interested in. In fact, when you listen to Let's Go Swimming, if you put the two songs together, you could actually see how Arthur heard me in one context, an R&B context, and say, hey, this is how it happened. And, for me, it was a very different type of thing. Arthur's just whole aura, and the fact that he played cello and this electrified stuff, it was so different than what I was accustomed to coming out of like an R&B and the beginning of hip hop, and it was fascinating. Now, it also happened that in another part of my life, I'm a social worker, and Arthur was very, very interested in hip hop, and coincidentally, the person who came to be Africa Bambaataa was, as a kid, known as Lance Taylor, and I was his counselor when he was in the Black Spades, and that was also something that we just happened to talk about. In fact, my wife sent Africa Bambaataa when he was still Lance Taylor. She and I worked at the same community center and sent Bambaataa through the UNICEF project to Africa for the first time. And so just these little coincidences at different points in time came up in conversation and just continued to feed our musical relationship. As far as the things that I say that I'm most associated with, of course, Let's Go Swimming and The Light of the Miracle, which I loved a great deal, and of course Platform on the Ocean and Schoolbell Treehouse. And those things that Arthur, those sketches that really had the percussion really pushed out, continues to this day.
Anyway, I met Arthur when he came up at the end of a show that the Modern Lovers did in New York at the place called the Townhouse Theater. And it was the group was sort of almost over at that point, but Arthur seemed to like the show, and he came up and said, I write these songs, can I play you some songs? So I guess a week or two after, he came up to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I remember he stayed, I think, a couple of days in my apartment, and just played me an enormous number of songs, and they were very beautiful songs. They were mostly, sort of were folk songs, but they were different. And then he said, I want to record these with a band. And I said, well, I have some friends that I've been playing with, so I took Jerry Harrison and on keyboards and Andy Paley, who was a great drummer, on drums, and we went to New York and recorded. I think the first thing we did was for Paul Nelson. I don't know if you know Paul Nelson? He was he was one of the best rock writers, and he ended up doing, I think he was the head of part of Rolling Stones album reviews or something. He died a couple of years ago, but he had been a big Modern Lovers fan, and then he was suddenly an Arthur fan, and he was one of the first record company people that took Arthur into the studio. And so anyway, we drove down to New York, and that's how I started working with Arthur. What can I say? That just since then, his songs are the best songs I know. So the idea of getting a chance to play them now is great.
And I was 19, and it informed my life after that. Ernie Brooks had given me a tape of Arthur's, several tapes of his Flying Hearts material, and it informed all of the listening that I did after. that, and I just couldn't find anything that compared to it. It was deceptively simple sounding, melodic, beautiful, complex. When I looked at the tablature that Arthur used and gave his musicians to follow along, I saw that he had a bar of 2 here, a bar of 6, and then would go back to 4 for 8 measures, and then back in and throw in a bar of 2. He did that in a way that it sounded seamless, and it sounded like it was all in 4/4. But now I'm finding out that through his work at the Ali Akbar School of Music in Berkeley and Manhattan School of Music, and his sophisticated studies of primordial sound through his mantra work, and he was a student of Vajrayana Buddhist thought, and really incorporated all of that into his music. I feel very lucky to have encountered him in my lifetime.